In the annals of British criminal history, few names evoke a mixture of horror and morbid fascination, quite like George Haigh. Born into a strict religious family and raised under the watchful eyes of devoutly conservative parents, Haigh's story was never destined for simplicity, but no one could have predicted just how far he would stray from the path of normality. He would become known by a name that seemed pulled straight from a nightmare: the acid bath killer. And unlike many murderers whose rage stems from impulse or passion, Haigh was different. He didn't kill out of hatred. He killed out of convenience. He killed for profit. And he believed he had found the perfect way to get away with it. The foundation of Haigh's dark descent was laid early. Raised in a strict Plymouth Brethren household, George Haigh was taught to fear sin, to live with purity, and to keep his eyes away from the corrupting world. But beneath the surface of this piety brewed a darker curiosity, a fascination with deception, with illusion, with power. As a young man, Haigh showed promise. Intelligent, articulate, and charming, he was the type of person others naturally trusted. He dressed well, spoke with sophistication, and carried himself with the air of someone destined for success. But instead of channeling his gifts into honest work, Haigh chose shortcuts. Petty crime became his calling card. Fraud, forgery, deception. It seemed almost too easy for him. He didn't steal through violence. He stole through charisma and lies. That flair for trickery eventually caught up with him. By the time he was in his 20s, Haigh had already served time for fraud, and it was behind bars that he stumbled upon an idea that would change everything. It wasn't an epiphany of remorse. It was a revelation of opportunity. Reading legal textbooks during his prison stint, Haigh discovered a loophole he believed could make him unstoppable. British law at the time stated that for a murder conviction to occur, there had to be proof. A body, a corpse, a physical presence of the deceased. But what if there was no body to find? What if he could make a person disappear entirely? That question became an obsession, and to answer it, Haigh turned to chemistry. He learned that sulfuric acid had the terrifying ability to dissolve organic matter. With enough time and volume, it could reduce a body to unrecognizable sludge, leaving virtually no trace behind. No corpse, no evidence, and, he believed, no crime. What followed was a calculated campaign of murder and manipulation unlike anything Britain had seen before. Haigh didn't target strangers in alleyways or victims of opportunity. He chose people he knew, people who trusted him, people with money, and that trust was the very thing he would weaponize. Over the span of several years in the 1940s, Haigh lured victim after victim into his web. Business associates, wealthy acquaintances, even family friends. He gained their confidence, presented investment schemes or financial partnerships, then made his move. Once alone, the victims were murdered, usually with a single gunshot, and then disposed of in large containers of acid. In his mind, the process was elegant, even foolproof. After the acid had done its work, Haigh would dispose of the remains, forge documents in the victim's name, and seize their assets. He posed as their friend, their advisor, even their heir. To the outside world, they had simply vanished, gone off to start new lives, or simply disappeared without a trace. And for a while it worked. The authorities had no bodies. Haigh appeared polished and respectable, and the paper trail, forged though it was, painted him as a legitimate associate of his victims. He lived comfortably on the spoils, staying in luxury hotels, dining lavishly, and dressing in the finest suits. He became a man of society, a gentleman killer hiding in plain sight. But no illusion lasts forever. And Haigh's downfall came, as so many do, from overconfidence. His final victim was a wealthy widow named Olive Duran Deacon. Like the others, she was impressed by Haigh's charm and believed he could help her with a business venture. And like the others, she disappeared. But unlike previous cases, this disappearance sparked immediate concern. Olive had friends in high places, people who pushed for answers. The police began to investigate, and what they found beneath Haigh's polished veneer was chilling. It wasn't long before detectives uncovered a disturbing trail, evidence of forged documents, inconsistencies in Haigh's story, and suspicious purchases of large quantities of acid. When they searched a property he had been using, a small, grimy workshop, they discovered personal belongings of missing individuals, a revolver, and, in a grim twist, sludge in the yard that tested positive for human fat and body parts. The acid hadn't destroyed everything. Tiny fragments of bone and gallstones had survived. The illusion was shattered. When Haigh was arrested, he didn't deny the murders. In fact, he confessed readily, proudly even, but he was convinced of his own legal genius. He told investigators that he had destroyed the bodies, and therefore, they couldn't convict him. No bodies, no crime, just as he had read in those dusty prison law books. But he had been wrong, horribly wrong. The law had changed. Prosecutors no longer needed a complete body to prove a murder. Circumstantial evidence, confessions and trace remains were now admissible. Haigh's self-assurance turned out to be his greatest error. As his trial unfolded in 1949, the public watched with horror and fascination. The newspapers dubbed him the acid bath killer, and his calm demeanor in court sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened journalists. He claimed he drank the blood of his victims, a statement many believed was an attempt to plead insanity. But the jury wasn't swayed by theatrics. In less than a day, they found him guilty of murder. The sentence was swift: death. On August 10, 1949, John George Haigh was hanged at Wandsworth Prison. His crimes had shocked the nation, not just because of their brutality, but because of their cold logic. He hadn't killed in anger. He hadn't killed in madness. He had killed for money, methodically, repeatedly, and with a chilling sense of detachment. But perhaps what makes Haigh's story truly haunting is the mask he wore. He wasn't a raving lunatic. He wasn't the stereotype of a killer. He was articulate, well-dressed, polite, even likable. He moved through polite society with ease, all the while hiding a monstrous secret. It wasn't rage that fueled him, it was calculation, and that calculation led him to believe he could outsmart justice. He was wrong. Today, the memory of John George Haigh lingers not just in the record books of true crime history, but in the collective consciousness of a nation that learned, through him, that evil doesn't always wear a frightening face. Sometimes it smiles, sometimes it shakes your hand, sometimes it offers you tea, and behind that civility, it waits, calculated, cold, and ready. John George Haigh believed he could make people disappear, but in the end, it was he who left a mark that could never be erased.